Welcome to our channel. Tonight, we bring you two spine-chilling tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. First, we explore the terrifying legend of an abandoned mansion that claimed the lives of four friends. Then, we'll take you deep into the haunted Blackwood Forest, where a cursed cabin holds dark secrets and a deadly fate. So, dim the lights, grab your popcorn, and get ready for a journey into the unknown. But be warned, these stories are not for the faint of heart. In the quiet town of Westbrook, nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, stood an ancient mansion abandoned for decades. The locals whispered tales of ghosts and curses, warning anyone who dared to venture near. But for Sarah, Mike, Julia, and Kevin, four college friends with a taste for adventure, it was the perfect spot for a thrilling night. One crisp autumn evening, they decided to test the town's legends. Armed with flashlights, snacks, and a couple of cameras to document their experience, they approached the mansion. As they drew closer, the air grew colder, and the sky seemed to darken. The house loomed before them, its windows like empty eyes staring into their souls. The front door creaked ominously as they pushed it open, revealing a grand but decaying foyer. Dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights, which penetrated the grime-covered windows. "Welcome to our home for the night," Sarah announced with a grin, her voice echoing through the empty halls. They set up camp in what used to be the living room, a large space with a crumbling fireplace and torn wallpaper. The atmosphere was eerie, but they laughed off their nervousness, attributing it to the overactive imaginations of the townsfolk. As night fell, they gathered around a makeshift fire in the fireplace, sharing ghost stories and daring each other to explore the darker corners of the mansion. Mike, the biggest skeptic, scoffed at the idea of ghosts, but couldn't help feeling a chill run down his spine when he thought no one was looking around midnight. Julia suggested they split up and investigate different parts of the house to gather more footage. Sarah and Kevin headed upstairs, while Mike and Julia stayed on the ground floor. Sarah and Kevin wandered through the dusty corridors, their flashlights flickering as they picked up strange noises. They found themselves in a child's bedroom, filled with old toys and a small bed that looked untouched by time. Sarah felt a cold breeze brush past her, and she shivered. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Kevin nodded, his eyes wide. "Let's keep moving." Meanwhile, Mike and Julia explored the kitchen and dining room, finding nothing but broken dishes and rotten furniture. Mike, trying to lighten the mood, made a joke about the state of the place, but Julia didn't laugh. She had a bad feeling she couldn't shake. Suddenly, they heard a loud crash from the basement. They exchanged worried glances but decided to investigate. The basement door creaked open, revealing a steep staircase leading into darkness. With a deep breath, they descended, their flashlights casting long shadows on the damp walls. To the bottom, they found an old furnace and piles of forgotten junk. But as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut, plunging them into pitch blackness. Julia screamed, and Mike pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Upstairs, Sarah and Kevin heard the scream and rushed to find their friends. They reached the basement door and tried to open it, but it seemed locked from the inside. Panic set in as they yelled for Mike and Julia, their voices echoing through the house. In the basement, Julia and Mike huddled together, their breaths coming in short gasps. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the corner of the room. They turned to see a figure, transparent and ghostly, drifting toward them. Its eyes were hollow, and its mouth opened in a silent scream back upstairs. Sarah and Kevin managed to break down the door, only to find the basement empty. There was no sign of Mike or Julia. Desperation set in as they searched every corner of the mansion. But their friends had vanished without a trace. As dawn approached, Sarah and Kevin were exhausted and terrified. They decided to leave and get help. But as they stepped outside, the mansion's door slammed shut behind them. They ran to the car, but it wouldn't start. They were trapped. In the days that followed, the townspeople searched for the missing friends, but found no clues. The mansion remained silent, its secrets hidden within its crumbling walls. Sarah and Kevin were never seen again, and their disappearance became another dark legend, whispered among the locals. Years later, a new group of thrill seekers arrived in Westbrook, eager to explore the haunted mansion. But as they approached the front door, they heard faint whispers warning them to stay away. Ignoring the warnings, they entered, unaware that they were walking into a trap set by the restless spirits of Sarah. Mike, Julia, and Kevin, the cycle of horror continued, as the mansion claimed more victims, feeding off their fear and despair. The friends' tragic fate served as a grim reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some places are best left undisturbed. Nestled deep within the sprawling Blackwood Forest stood an old, decrepit cabin known to the locals as the Curse House. For decades, the villagers spoke in hushed tones about the disappearances and strange occurrences that plagued anyone who dared to venture too close. But for Peter, Emily, Mark, and Sophie, 4 childhood friends with a shared love of the paranormal, it was the ultimate challenge. One brisk October evening, they decided to uncover the truth behind the legends. Armed with flashlights, camping gear, and a video camera to document their findings, they set off into the dense, shadowy forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, and as they approached the cabin, an eerie silence fell over the group. The cabin, bathed in the dim light of the setting sun, loomed ominously before them. Its wooden walls were warped and splintered, and the windows were covered in grime, giving it the appearance of a haunted relic from another time. Peter, the most adventurous of the group, took the lead. "Welcome to our haunted abode," he said with a grin. Pushing open the creaking door, the interior was just as unsettling as the exterior. Cobwebs hung like curtains from the ceiling, and the air was stale and musty. An old dust-covered fireplace dominated one wall, and broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. "This place gives me the creeps," Sophie whispered, clutching Emily's arm. Emily, ever the skeptic, shrugged. "It's just an old cabin. Let's set up our gear and start exploring." They set up camp in the main room, lighting a small fire in the fireplace to ward off the chill. As night fell, they gathered around the flickering flames, sharing ghost stories and laughing nervously. But as the hours passed, the laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence around midnight. They decided to split up and explore the cabin. Peter and Emily ventured upstairs, while Mark and Sophie stayed on the ground floor. The upper level was a maze of narrow hallways and small, dark rooms. Peter led the way, his flashlight casting eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper. In one of the rooms, they found an old, tattered journal. The pages were brittle and yellowed with age, but the writing was still legible. It belonged to a man named Elias Blackwood, the original owner of the cabin. As they read through the entries, a chilling story began to unfold. Elias had been a recluse, obsessed with the occult and dark rituals. The journal detailed his attempts to summon a powerful spirit to grant him eternal life. But something had gone terribly wrong. The final entry spoke of a curse, unleashed upon the cabin and the surrounding forest. A curse that would trap any who entered downstairs. Mark and Sophie discovered a hidden cellar beneath a loose floorboard. The air was colder as they descended the narrow staircase, their flashlights barely piercing the darkness. The cellar was filled with strange symbols etched into the walls and a large, circular stone altar in the center of the room. This must be where Elias performed his rituals, Mark said, his voice trembling suddenly. The door at the top of the stairs slammed shut, plunging them into darkness. Sophie screamed, and Mark pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. A low, guttural growl echoed through the cellar, and they turned to see a shadowy figure emerging from the darkness upstairs. Peter and Emily heard the scream and rushed to find their friends. They reached the cellar door and tried to open it, but it seemed locked from the inside. Panic set in as they heard the growl and Sophie's terrified cries. "Hold on, we're coming," Peter shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor in the cellar. Mark and Sophie were paralyzed with fear as the figure drew closer. It was a twisted, malevolent spirit, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. It reached out with clawed hands, and Mark pushed Sophie behind him, trying to protect her. "Stay back," he shouted, but the spirit lunged forward, passing through him as if he were nothing. Mark collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. As Sophie backed into a corner, tears streaming down her face, upstairs. Peter and Emily were desperate. They found a heavy iron rod and used it to pry open the cellar door. They rushed down the stairs, but it was too late. Mark lay motionless on the floor, and Sophie was nowhere to be found. "No, no, no," Emily cried, dropping to her knees beside Mark. She checked for a pulse, but there was none. He was gone. Peter shone his flashlight around the room, but the spirit had vanished, taking Sophie with it. They were alone in the darkness, with no idea what had happened to their friends. "We have to get out of here," Peter said, his voice shaking. "This place is cursed." They hurried back upstairs, but as they reached the main room, the front door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The windows rattled, and the walls seemed to close in around them. The cabin was alive. Feeding off their fear and despair, Emily grabbed the video camera and turned it on, desperate to document their last moments. "If anyone finds this, please stay away from this place. It's evil. It took our friends, and it won't stop until it takes us too." Suddenly, the fire in the fireplace roared to life, the flames turning an unnatural shade of blue. The shadows danced and twisted, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to reach out for them. "We have to go now," Peter shouted, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her toward the back door, but the cabin had other plans. The door frame warped and twisted, blocking their escape. The walls closed in, and the ceiling seemed to lower, pressing down on them. "Help! Somebody help us!" Emily screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the oppressive darkness. Peter and Emily clung to each other, their fear palpable. They could feel the cabin's malevolent energy feeding off their terror. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to thicken, enveloping them in the end. The curse claimed them both. Their screams echoed through the forest, but no one was there to hear. The cabin stood silent once more, its secrets buried within its walls. Years passed, and the legend of the curse house grew. The locals warned their children to stay away, but the allure of the unknown was too strong for some. A new group of thrill seekers arrived, Eager to uncover the truth behind the legends. As they approached the cabin, they heard faint whispers warning them to turn back. But they ignored the signs, driven by curiosity and a desire for adventure. They stepped inside, unaware that they were walking into a trap set by the restless spirits of Peter, Emily, Mark, and Sophie. The cycle of horror continued as the cabin claimed more victims, feeding off their fear and despair. The friends' tragic fate served as a grim reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some places are best left undisturbed.